So for today's demo, before we jump into the CAD part, it's important to remember what a section view is. So I went a little bit further ahead in the project. I will show you how to start to get this, so don't start panicking just yet. Um, and created the section view for our plan. But just to reiterate how it is related to our floor plan itself, so that's what these two signifiers here are, this part and then the tail part over here as well. So this is saying that there is a section view cut going through the building right here, and that if we were going to look at the building vertically, almost like an elevation, but with this part of the building cut away, what would we be seeing? And we can see those interior details of how one space relates to another. And so that's where a view like this comes from. It comes out of a section cut. Um, Typically, when I'm creating a building section like this, I'll do it based off of two different things. I'll do it based off of the elevation view because we're still going to use just kind of a similar overall outline so we can get some of our major measurements from that elevation. And then I also do it based off of a wall section, which is similar to a building section, but it's zoomed in on one particular wall or area to kind of show all of those connections and details. Because wall sections are meant for those construction details, we do them at a larger scale when plotting them or printing them out. So we can fit lots of details in there. And that's what we're going to practice with today is making a wall section. Just like with our building plans though, we're going to do the wall section at full size so we can fit lots of nitty-gritty details into it. And then I'll show you how you can bring that wall section into this set of plans to help uh, create this building section. So if we go to As You Learned, which let me just move that onto this screen for a moment, there is an assignment that we'll follow along with today, all about wall sections. And so let me just download these three files here, and we'll just kind of look at them one at a time a little bit. So using AutoCAD, we're going to create a wall section using the template file provided to help us start it off and create it a little bit easier. I'll upload it to As You Learn. And then we've got some notes here that I'll be referencing for which layers I should be using when, how to set up my title block in Sheets, which is something I'll go over in a lot more detail next little lecture video, but we will take a look at what Paperspace is today at least, which layers we should be using where, how we should have our scale set, where our cut's going through. And so it's saying here that our cut is going through the west facing window in that, it says 3-room, it should say 2-room, but I forgot to change that, so my apologies. Shed. And basically what it's saying is, where is that wall section cutting through? So again, this time, instead of going all the way through the building for this wall section, it's just going through the middle of this window. We often will do typical wall sections through a window or some type of opening in the wall to help us show those different connections. And then there's lots of references related to which hatch patterns you should be using and what scale they should be at. There's nothing listed about the angle, or rather the rotation, and that's because there are a few of these that we do have to rotate a little bit for it, and so we'll look at that when we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Then on the next page is just a reference drawing of what the final product will look like. I know this seems very daunting, but when we look at the template file, hopefully it becomes a little less daunting. And then, of course, remember, I am going to walk you through it. And there's also then a file of the same drawing, but just printed with color so that this way you can see how the layers come into play. And the importance of the different colors with the layers, and again, we'll talk about this not this week, but next week when we go over plotting drawings, um, is that these different colors get translated as different line weights when we go to print. So we can see here that that red line prints a little bit thicker. The lines that are yellow then are the next thickest, and then the blue lines kind of are a little bit lighter. Our hatches are even lighter. We even have different um, line weights, or even technically different colors for like the hatch of our ground versus the hatch that's the gravel. And so that's what those different layers or those different colors translate to. The color pink or magenta prints out with a lighter line weight than the color blue. If we zoom in a little bit more, we can see that in a little bit more detail that these yellow lines are printing out thicker. This red line is the thickest. And that's why I've been harping on so much about making sure you're in the right layer, be in the right layer, and things like that. So let's open up the template file and take a look at it and begin. So in this template, the foundation and the bottom of the window are already constructed for us. So we don't really have to worry about creating those, which can hopefully make it a little more of a manageable project and relieve some of you guys who saw that initial drawing and just said, what the hell? So for the bottom part, we're just going to have to focus on reassigning all the layers, because this drawing has committed one of the cardinal sins of drafting, in which everything is layer 0. And oh my goodness, we never, ever, ever want to do that. I am going to save the layers for like the last part of the project, just because I know that looking at blue lines on this very dark gray, it's not quite black, but very dark gray background, for me is very hard on my eyes, so I imagine for you guys it probably is as well. So we will do that part last. We'll just focus on kind of constructing the rest of it for now. And then before we begin too, I just kind of want to look at the annotation scale. So we can see over here that our annotation scale is already set to 1 inch equals a foot. And that just helps kind of control how our line weights, or rather our line scale, excuse me, looks in the drawing currently. So if I switched this to like 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, saying that I wanted to get this ready to print at 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, and I used regen to redo my drawing, we can see that my line scale gets much, much different. Which is why we generally want to have that set beforehand. And we can set it differently for different drawings as well, which we'll look at when we get to setting everything up to print. It'll just be so much fun that why spoil it now? So to look at paper space 2 here, that's what these little tabs down here are. Typically, it'll just say like layout 1 in a brand new blank AutoCAD drawing, but because I already set this file up, we have here it's set up with the kind of sheet number for us already. And this is paper space, so it's set up with an 11 by 17 sheet of paper with a title block kind of already started for us. I'll just change some of this stuff in here, because this is no longer class project 8. And it's a 2-room shed. Not that that would be make or break for the assignment, but so we've got some text boxes here that we can just kind of double click on, change what it says, double click on, change the date, so on and so forth. But in here we have viewports. And so these are just little windows into model space. And what that allows us to do is really anything that I do in here. So if I just put a bunch of random lines here to show you, anything I do in model space automatically will show up in paper space. So I do all of my drawing stuff in model space, and then I can move it over into here, scale it, make different windows, maybe hide parts that I want hidden for that particular view. And we have 3 viewports in here. So that's what these little boxes are. And they're also, we can see here that I did them in the layer Anno view because I go into layer properties, the layer, let me make that bigger. Hello, please let me drag that. There we go. Um, the layer Anno view is a non-plotting layer, so it won't print out. So we won't see these big weird boxes on our drawing. But this way we can kind of have those automatic breaks in our drawing. So we are going to draw, if we look at this solution here of the finished product, we are going to draw this all the way up, the entire thing. But when we go to print it, we're going to print it with little kind of breaks or cuts throughout the project or throughout the wall section. And that's just so we can fit it all on the sheet of paper at a large enough scale to keep the detail still kind of visible. And so instead of having the entire foundation wall, we're just able to see how the foundation wall connects to the footing, and then how the foundation wall connects to the floor, how the floor connects to the wall, how the sill connects to the window, or how the wall connects to the window. Same thing with the header of the window at the top of it, and then how the wall connects to the roof. So we're able to just see those major connections of the major parts of construction and framing without having to show the entire thing. Because if I set it up showing the entire piece, I'd have to use a smaller scale to fit it all on the sheet, and then I would lose a lot of that detail that I need to hold on to. And with that, let's begin. Now, oh, actually, sorry, I always forget to other things I want to mention. These viewports that are on your template are currently locked in place, and so I could double click, which, whoa, I don't want it to do it that way. If I double click inside that viewport, it will open up model space essentially. So like I can delete this, I can take all of these ugly lines I made, and I can use the delete button to erase them. And they get erased over here. Some of them were out of the viewport, so we couldn't see them. But any changes I make here in paper space, when I have double clicked and activated this model space, get changed here as well. Let me just Control Z to get my Batt Insulation back. But I do have the viewport locked currently. And that's just so you don't accidentally zoom around and mess up the alignment of these views or change the scale. So if I clicked on this and unlocked it, well, now I can scale this viewport around, and then, uh-oh, now everything isn't lined up anymore. My scale is now off. So they are set to be locked in this drawing. I just Control Z to undo that. Don't unlock them. Really, in paper space, you shouldn't be touching in any of these viewports at all. You should just be changing the title block out. And when we do our final project, though, you will be setting up your own viewports. You will be creating your own model space and zooming around at them. So we will get some experience with that, but just don't do anything to this drawing. Please and thank you. Now, let's get into finishing up the rest of this wall section. So completing where the top of the header is and where the ceiling and everything, where ceiling and roof sit. So we have already that sill detail, like I mentioned. We just need to start and add in the header and everything else. Because you've already been given this, we can use a lot of it for the details that we'll need up here. Because we can see, looking at it, that it is a lot of the same stuff, but it's just kind of flipped to be on the top. And because of that, we're going to use it to our advantage, using the mirror tool to flip it up. And so the first thing I'll do is draw a line, which is right up here, with keyboard shortcut L, enter, from the bottom of the header to the top of the sill. So that's just then going to let me know where I can kind of give me a reference to mirror this across. And then I'm just going to highlight all of this stuff. And so I did that with the cross selection rather than a window selection. So that way I got a lot of it. I'm going to get more than I technically need. So some of it I will have to delete to get out. But I'm still going to have all of this reference and line stuff on the top of it. And so this right here, this little space where my cursor is, that's the plywood sheathing sitting outside my wall. This little dotted line is my house wrap. I'm still going to have house wrap continuing on top of my window. And then this area between these two solid lines, this is my wood, my vertical wood clapboard, I guess, or my vertical wood planks, decking, I don't know what you want to call it, for my siding. Um, so I still am going to want all of that stuff on top of it. I'm not going to have anything like this little square here. So this is my baseboard going around the bottom of everything. It's definitely my, like, the amount of space for this space right here, which is my gypsum wallboard on the inside. It's not going to be as tall as it is down here, but I still am going to want it up at the top just for a reference. And so that's why I just did a cross selection just to get all of it rather than to have to nitpick each piece. And so now that I have it all selected, I'm going to go into the mirror tool, which is up here, or keyword shortcut MI, enter, and I want to specify the first point of my mirror line, which I want to be in the middle between these two pieces. And so because it's not showing me the midpoint snap automatically, it's just showing me endpoints, I'm going to hold shift and right click and say, show me the midpoint. And then I can grab onto the midpoint and just move my cursor across, click, and it's saying, do you want to erase this original part? So do you want to just have this flipped version and get rid of this original? And so I'm going to say no, because I want to keep this down here, but I want this up here. And so now I have a lot of the details that I'm going to need for my roof, or for rather like my header and stuff, done. I'm going to take this batt insulation up here and just delete it for now. And then I just need to kind of connect the different pieces for my windows. Two ways I could do that is I could click on like this line, then choose its grip and stretch it up. I could do that for all of these lines. Not incorrect to do it that way. I'll get the same end result. But a faster method would be to use the extend tool, which it's, if you click on this little arrow next to trim, you can find the tool for extend, or keyboard shortcut EX, enter. And what extend will do is it'll just bring these up to meet. And if I even click off of it, I can just drag my line through all the things I want to extend and just bring them to meet fast. Sometimes, and let me Control Z to undo that. Sometimes extend can be finicky. So because, like, for right now, because it can't see the point it's extending to, it's telling me that it can't possibly extend it up. Which it's sometimes, that can be a little annoying, sure, but that's just what it does. Not sure why. And again, too, I'm doing all of this with a mouse, so I can just hold down the scroll wheel to easily pan, and then without having to like leave commands. If you don't have a mouse, you can use like this little shortcut thing here to be able to just grab onto that, pan, and then hit escape to end it. But I really just still highly recommend you get a computer mouse. It'll be so much more helpful to use all of the different software that you're going to use. And they're also not too expensive. You can get a wired one. I have a wired mouse, so that way it makes it a little cheaper. And especially when we get into Revit next, you're going to really want a computer mouse. So I would highly recommend going and buying one. And so then I have a lot of my window done without having to do too much effort. Now to finish off the rest of the header, so I'm just going to once again use a cross selection just to get all of these kind of references for this piece of dimensional lumber. So this is a 2x6, and I'm just going to copy it, keyboard shortcut CO, grab a place to grab it by, and I'm just going to make 2 copies of it over here and hit escape. And then I'm going to highlight one of them and rotate it, which is right up here, or keyboard shortcut RO, enter. And for my base point, the stationary point to rotate it, it's not going to matter too much, so I'll just grab on any point, and I just want to make it stand up. So this then is just going to give me references to help me build out the rest of my header and my top plate. And so I'll take this guy, my vertical one, CO again for copy, and for this time, for my base point of where I'm grabbing it by, I'm going to grab it by a place that I know I want to put it in. So I'm going to grab it by this bottom right corner, and now where it's saying, and where do you want it to go? I'm just going to say I want it to go right here. Now, because I want the other one right here, what I'm going to have to do is hit escape and go back into the copy command, which I could just shortcut my way into by just hitting space. It brings me right back into the last command I ever did. Or I could just highlight it again, go back into CO for copy. This time I'll do the bottom left corner, and then I want to put it there. Additionally, what you can do for copying is you can do it based off a specific distance. So instead of using this as the one I'm going to copy, I'll just show you an example with this guy. So I highlight this one, I go copy, enter, click a place to grab it by, and then I could type in a specific distance I want to move this up. So rather than just saying I want to go to this endpoint, which is personally what I would do, but if I just have a reference of a distance I want, so for instance, I know I want it to go 1.5 up plus 5.5 up, which would be 7. So I could move my cursor the direction I want to go, type a distance I want, enter, and I could move it a specific distance away. So that's another way you could use the copy tool. Now I have my header in place, and I could take this line here and delete it because I just needed it as a reference to help me make this. And then lastly, for the wall at least, not lastly for the project, we're only 23 minutes in, is I'm going to put in my double top plate. So I'm just going to put a line across to reference where my top plate will sit, which, whoops, let me hit escape. And then take this 2x6 piece of lumber that I have and go into the copy tool, CO enter, and this time I'll grab it by this top corner and I'll just say I want it to go here and here. And now I have that double top plate. And now I can start working on adding in the references for my roof. So I'm not going to trim and cut away all of this stuff just yet because some of it I still could use. I am going to trim this part off just because since this is all connected, it's going to make some weird lines for me right here. So I am just going to trim this off, and just get rid of that temporarily, and so that this way I can still use all of this for reference in my drawing. And sorry if there are a bunch of weird little cuts. I have been sneezing so much today. But now I'll start to add in my like my roof details. So we're gonna have a 2x8 sitting here. It is going to get sliced a little bit. So if we look at the finished product, this right here is a 2x8, but it just is getting cut at that angle. I'm going to draw it in as a normal 2x8 for now. And then after I do all of my offsetting, that's when I'll know where that cut's going. So we're just going to leave it as a 2x8. And two ways I could do that is I could just draw in a fresh new one. So it would be 1.5 by 7.25. Or I could take this guy here that I have as my reference, and I could stretch it by that middle snap, and I could stretch it up. So if it's currently 5.5 and I want it to be 7.25, that would be, oh no, I need a calculator. So I want 7.25 and I have 5.5, 1 3/4. Okay. So I could click and do it by that middle grip, and just after I start pulling it up, I could do 1.75 and then just move these grips up. One way I could do it. Another way I could do it is just to go into the rectangle tool up here, or keyboard shortcut REC, enter. Don't know why it lagged a bit there. And then I could just say that I want to do it 1.5, tab to enter in my other dimension, 7.25, and then just draw 2 lines across the diagonals. L, enter, and escape to end it. I'm getting the exact same end result either way, so whichever way you find easier, go with. And then I'll just take this guy here, and I could copy it over there. I'm going to use the move tool just to give a variety of tools. The keyboard shortcut M, enter, or this tool here. Pick a place to grab it by. So I always just reference, okay, if I know where that corner is going to sit here, that's what I'll use as my reference. And also too, you can go into any of these commands without having your object selected first. So if I go into the move tool without selecting anything, the first step is select your objects. So then I can highlight my object, enter, and now it's asking me for a base point to grab it by. I just tend to select the objects first just to skip that step in the tool itself, but again, whatever you find easiest or whatever works best for you, please do it that way. Okay, now let's start moving or making our rafter coming up here. So I'm going to delete that reference line and start with a line, which, hello, thank you. My AutoCAD is being a little laggy today, so I apologize if it just starts to be a little slower. So I'll start with a line, L, enter, from right here, and I'm going to just go up for my slope. So I'm going to go up 3 feet, enter, over 12 feet, enter, and then just connect the dots. Hit escape, take these 2 reference lines, delete them. Don't need them anymore. I could also take these and delete them too because I don't need them anymore. Yes. Didn't sound very confident, but I trust myself. So now this right here, this line is representing my rafter, the bottom edge of my rafter. And so now I'm going to offset it several times, several different lengths to make my the lines for my gypsum wallboard for my ceiling, which please note the gypsum wallboard is actually for the ceiling is a different gypsum wallboard than the wall, so it's 5/8 down. And then I'll do another offset up for the thickness of the rafter, which is 7.25. Then another offset up for not that line, for this line here, which is my plywood sheathing or decking, which is 3/4 of an inch. Then this line right here is our house wrap, and it's 1/8 of an inch up from it. Now I know house wrap is typically not 1/8 of an inch thick, but that's just how we're going to show it. And also, while I have the drawing here, the way we show it overlapping over here is going to look a little bit different too. Because when you have house wrap and you're switching from one piece to another one, you want to make sure that you have a good overlap between the two of them. So that's why this roof one, we're going to bring it out a little bit further and down a little bit. And so from my plywood decking, that's up 1/8 of an inch. Then we have our little piece. I believe this is to connect our gutter to our house. So that's another 1/8 of an inch up. And then up from that, 1/4 inch for our roof. And then up from that, 1 inch. And that'll be all of our different layers for our roof. And so let's start that. So I'm going to take this line here, and I'm going to use the offset tool, which is right here, or keyboard shortcut O, enter. I'm going to leave it set as through. So because it says through in that text box currently, and also in my command bar down here, it has through in those little triangular carets. That means that if I hit enter without typing any specific offset distance, it's going to do a through. And a through lets you choose that offset distance as you go. And since I want to do it a bunch of different sizes, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to hit enter. I'm going to bring it down 5/8, which I did 5.8, 5/8. There we go. And then with the same line, I'm going to bring it up 7 1/4 for my rafter. Then up 3/4 of an inch for my plywood decking. Then up again 1/8 of an inch. And I could also just type this in 1/8 for that house wrap. Then up another 1/8 of an inch for that little piece of like gutter line, which this won't be a full line on our drawing, but that's okay. Then up 1/4 for the start of our roof, our metal roofing, and then up 1 inch. And so that's going to be all the layers of our roof. And now I'm going to use the trim tools and the extend tools to kind of cut everything down. So first I'll use extend, which again is this button right here. I know on a Mac, I don't think it is a drop down, but underneath trim, I think it is just its own tool on its own on the Mac. So I don't know. And I'll just click over here just so I can start bringing these all through it. And I'll just keep saying, keep going further, keep going further. Trying to think as I do this, which lines represent what. So that way I don't bring any of them too far. But if I bring it too far, it really won't be the end of the world. And so this is that house wrap one. So I do want to bring that guy a little bit further. Don't know why it snapped to that middle part. That's a little weird. But okay, sure. And escape. And then I'm going to go into the trim tool. So that's TR for your keyboard shortcut. Enter. I'm just going to click down here just so I can trim all of those off. I want them to all end at this line because that's where like all of my floor joists and pretty much all of my line work ends. And this line here is in that depth point layer, which is a layer that doesn't print out, which we all love and enjoy. Let me get back into the trim tool so I can cut off like parts of my wall here that I have going too far. I don't know these random little points that it's going to. So my wall does not go up that far. because that's my roof. You can also trim off all that part of this little piece of blocking, so now I know where it ends. I can trim off this here, this here. I'm actually going to leave that as this kind of sealed open piece for now, and I'll explain why in a second, even though I am going to fill in this little line back. And sometimes it's very difficult for me to visualize how these look and work. And so if it is for you too, don't fret. I think that's all the trimming I want to do. And so I'll take this guy and I'll shorten him down quite a bit. So I'm just pulling on that grip, making sure that it's still extending at that same angle that it originally was at. And I'll just make him go a little far, not too far. This, as I said, is going to be that house wrap layer. So what I'm going to do now is actually switch this one's line type over. And so for the Mac users, that's in your properties bar down here. For us on Windows, you can either do that in here with your properties, so you can switch it over to be a hidden line. Or if you have anything in your drawing selected, you can right click properties, and then that'll open up this properties bar. It usually starts as kind of like a floating window up here. I typically have it just constantly open. I closed it for this demo, but now since I reminded you how to open it, I'm going to leave mine open. Because you can also change the line types and the line scales for individual lines over here as well. Oh, I thought I was hitting escape, but instead I was hitting the little, not quite apostrophe, I don't know what exactly it is. And then I'll even draw in a little line. So really what I want it to do is actually, I shouldn't have extended it to there. I should have extended it to there and then stretched it out 0.125. And then I'm going to draw a line down, L, enter, from that endpoint down, and then switch just this line's line type over, which again, you can do several ways. I'm going to change it a little bit. I'm going to make it a little bit longer just because I don't want how originally I unintentionally made it that like all of these little hiddens matched up almost perfectly. And I just didn't like that. I like having them be a little bit different. And I'm also just going to take this endpoint of it too and just smush it down a little bit. Okay. Now let me just double check that I've got everything kind of set up the way I want to, and then we can add in our Batt Insulation, we can change our layers, and turn this into the real full-fledged deal. I might need to add a gutter in too. So hold on. I'll double check that, but I'll pause the recording for you guys so you don't have to sit here and watch me double check it. Okay, I think I'm pretty confident we're all good. I am just going to take this little short line that I have here, extend him up a little bit more just because in the other drawing he does not look that short. And he should also go down to here, which is where then this cuts off as well. And this will be used to help me make my roof, and I'm also going to take this line down and drag him down because my roof is going to have a little fun cutout of sorts here. So for that roof cutout for the um, other bits, I'm just going to draw a line out, so extended right off of this one, only out about like 1/4 of an inch, and then straight up to meet the roof. So that'll be just part of my little roof area. And then for my gutter, I'm going to do it as a 2-point circle. I could do it with arcs, but for some reason I just have a real dislike of arcs. I'm not sure why, don't know why I don't like them, but I just really hate using the arc tool and I never do it. So I'm going to do a 2-point circle and just trim it down into an arc. So if I click on my circle options, I can go to a 2-point one, or what I could do, so if I hit escape, if I just use the keyboard shortcut for circle, which is C, I can use those grayed out options in the bottom with the blue text. So I can either click on here to switch my circle over to a 2-point, or if I type 2P, enter, it switches me over to a 2-point. And I'll just click on where I want one edge of it to be, move my cursor over, and now it's essentially asking me the diameter, which this is a 4.5 wide gutter. I'll use the offset tool to bring it in 1/4 of an inch. And then I'll use the line tool to draw a line to slice it in half. And then I'll use trim, keyboard shortcut TR, to cut it in half. Which I thought, oh, there is that, not like that would have made the end of the world, but. And so I have my little gutter. And the reason why I cut that part of the line off, even though if we look at the drawing, there is a line there, it's because they're 2 different layers. They're 2 different line weights. So I could have used the break tool, but instead I'm just going to draw it in as a separate line. So now this is separate from what this is. Otherwise it would have all been one piece and I couldn't give it 2 different layers. Same thing here too, of why I trimmed that off just to go into the line tool and put it back on, is because this is going to be at a different layer than what this is. So I've got my gutter. Now time to add in this batt insulation, which looks like a hatch. And when we learned about what insulation was in the drawing, I described it as a hatch. But in AutoCAD, it's not. It's actually considered a line. So if I click on this, we can see here in my properties bar that it's being defined as a line, and that insulation is actually a line type that we loaded into the template. So by default, it's not there. But if you ever do need to add it into a drawing, you can come to your properties and click on other and then load, and you can either search for it or you can just scroll until you see if that thing could stop popping up. There's batting, and you can load it into your drawing. Right now it's telling me, hey, you already have that. Now, batt insulation is just used when we use the line tool. So if I go into line, enter, it'll just create it for me like a line, like any other line would. If I need it at different sizes, then I need to change the line type scale of just this one piece of insulation. Now, there is a keyboard shortcut to change line type scale, and it's LT scale. The issue is LT scale changes all of your line type scales. So by default, it's set to 1. If I set it to 0.25, it changes every line type scale. So it changed this one, it changed all my hidden lines, it changed this one, and so everything shrunk. So I'll just Control Z to undo that. The way to change it for individuals is in this properties bar, and this is going to be, like I said on Mac, down in this bottom area. But if I click on this one, we can see that for the 5 by, or the 2 by 6s, we're using a line type scale of 5. And for the 2 by 8s, for this area, which is our floor joist, we're using 0.75. Sometimes it is just kind of playing around with those numbers until you get things the way you want them to be. So I've got my line type set to batting, and then I'm just going to draw a line from midpoint to midpoint here, which I could do that shift right click and click on midpoint. I'm just going to hover over that point without clicking and then click here and then go straight up, hit escape. I'll click on this one and I'll change its line type scale to 0.5. If you don't like how that looks, technically that is correct. But if you want it to look more so like this one right here, which, because I did it with a polyline maybe? Let's see. Let's see if that's really going to make that big of a difference for us. Here, we'll experiment. From there to there, line type scale of 0.5. No, I didn't think so. I could have sworn it was just because I switched it to like 0.6 and I just fiddled around with that number until it still fit nicely in here without having those ugly overlaps. Those ugly overlaps aren't against the rules, but to me that just looks better and cleaner. So I did a line type scale of 0.55. I could even try, oops, I did 2.3. That's like 0.53 fits. So it's still close to what I have here. You're not going to really recognize a difference, but it just looks a little bit cleaner. Same thing then too is I'll make a line through here going from shift right click. Well, actually first, hold on. Let me draw a line for a reference right there, which I forgot I was still in insulation. That's okay. I could still grab the midpoint. And then I'll go back into a line, shift right click, midpoint of this to shift right click, midpoint of that. Because the interesting thing I think about Batt Insulation is that it doesn't recognize in the software that this is a curvy little line thing. It doesn't really know that about it. It's just a line type. So especially if you really want to freak yourself out, you can forget that you're in Batt Insulation and then go to make a circle and then wonder what is happening. Because that's happened to me before where I forgot that I switched my layer over and I was like, oh my God, what is that? I'll take this little guy and delete him because I just used him as a reference. And then I'm going to switch the line type scale here to 0.75 and maybe even play around with it a little bit more. Maybe move this guy over. So I'm just kind of playing around with some of it so that way it fits more the way I think would look better. 0.73. I like how that looks. So we'll leave it at that. I'm just kind of playing around with some of those numbers just to see how it fits. And now is time to assign all of our layers and then do our hatches, and I'll start you off on how to do the annotations or the leaders, but I'm not going to sit and place every one of them. And so let's start looking at our layers. So as I mentioned, the different colors are going to be associated with different line weights or thicknesses in our drawings. And there's two ways that we can go through and assign our layers to make sure that everything does get assigned one. What I find as a nice helpful trick is to assign the layer you want. So for these, I want them to be in this red layer here, but I actually want them to be a continuous line. So I'm going to switch this off to say, make it continuous. And then what I tend to do is make it that those layers are turned off. So that way it gets it goes bye-bye in my drawing. It's almost as if it wasn't there anymore. It still exists, it still is in my drawing, but I just have that layer turned off so that this way I know I have assigned it. So what I often do when I'm assigning layers to stuff is the ones I'm primarily going to use in this drawing are this section outline, medium, light, beyond. If I have all of those turned off, that means that as I give layers to things, so as I take all of these and switch them over to this magenta layer for A section light, they go bye-bye. I get a little code saying, hey, those got switched over to a layer that's no longer visible. That's okay. That's what I wanted. And so again, I can just click on things that I want to change, come up here, change their layer. I get this error that says, hey, those were put on a layer that you don't have currently turned on. And that way I can kind of just know that I switched them without having to go back and forth to say, did I switch that or not? Another easy way too is like, okay, well, if it has color to it, obviously you switched it. But I don't know, whatever, if you think that's going to be helpful and work for you, then do it that way with them turned off. Um, like I said, I do like to work that way when I'm doing it. For this demo, I won't do it that way because I feel like that's going to be hard for you guys. So I'll do it the other way, the normal way, and switch my layers around. So I turned all of them back on, and I'm just going to start highlighting a bunches of stuff that I know I want switched. So these are all going to be in that medium layer, that blue one. And I got this little line here. And I'll probably be, if I'm honest with you guys, kind of more quiet than I typically am switching these because it's a fairly self-explanatory process, I feel like, of which of what I'm doing is I'm just selecting things. I'm selecting a lot at a time just to make it a little easier on myself. Switching their layer. Oops, let me just highlight a lot of it. Those go to medium. The overall outline of the foundation goes into outline. The little circles around the rebar hatch, which are a little hard to grasp onto without getting the hatch. Go into medium. This line will be medium, so this one. All of the dimensional lumber kind of signifier things are going to be in that light or the magenta layer. And so I'm actually going to switch those because those will be easier to switch first. You could click directly on these, or you could do like the little cross window highlighting technique that I do. Light. Bunch of the parts of the window too are going to be in the light. This will be outline. This will be outline. These will be beyond. I can just delete these little bits of it. Oops. Just drag that up after I accidentally deleted a part I didn't need to. Because a lot of the drawing is done with polylines or rectangles, it'll make it a little easier just to select directly onto things. Switch that over to medium. Switch this over to medium. So the yellow one should be what's directly on the outside of the building. So that's why, or rather directly on the outside of the cut. So that's why there's that heavy yellow line essentially directly on the cutting plane itself. Boop, that little guy should be blue. This should be blue, medium. It looks like that's just some reference line from the original drawing. So I'll just delete it. Light. Light. And send my little piece of flashing down there. Will be yellow. All of the lines for my. Let me just, it looks like I deleted a line there, but it could be that def point line just got somehow pushed to the front. Let me just double check. These all are actually going to go in this pattern layer, because even though they technically are lines, not hatches, they're still describing hatches. So I'm just going to click on this def point line here and right click, draw order, send to back, which, ooh, good. I thought I accidentally deleted a bunch of line work. And so sometimes too, some of these lines, they might show up in front of ones that you don't want them to show up in front of. It's not going to make a big deal in the drawing itself, because when we go to print the drawing out, it's not going to necessarily think about color. Remember, it's thinking about line weight. And that's one of the reasons why, though, having the right lines associated in the right places. Because for instance, if I have something drawn in, just let me turn it back on, in this red layer, if I have a line here, which I again forgot I was in Batt Insulation, so let me override that. So if I have a red line here, but then, why are my layer drop downs not working? There we go. But then I have a medium line, a blue one sitting on top of it. I forgot I'm still in Batt. When will I learn? So let me just switch this over to bi layer for now so I don't. So in my eyes, that's just a blue line. Looking at this drawing, oh, it's just a blue line. There's no difference to it. But when it goes to print, this line's going to print out crazy thick compared to what I want it to do because that red line is behind there and I just can't see it or know it. So that's why kind of double checking all of your layers is an important task. And let me just click on this hatch. And I can change the layer of the hatch by either going into properties here or in my home tab, switching up the layer to the post one. See a little line here I forgot. Medium. The issue sometimes too with selecting like a lot at once is sometimes you get things selected that you didn't intend to. I believe, let me just double check. That should just be all pink, right? Yep. So that's all pink. Same thing. Let me just pan my way up to the top. I'm just climbing this window. All pink. All in the light layer. This is in our medium line weight. Even though some of it's going to get overpowered, it's okay because it has a yellow line weight on top of it. What happens if I just delete that little line? Okay. Nothing looked too severe, so that's the good news. Did I change this down here to blue? I did. Okay. So then just to double check that I have all of my layers changed to the way I need them to be. Hello. Little drop down. Please come drop down. Thank you. I'm going to switch myself over to layer 0. And I'm going to turn layers off. So if I turn off the outline, see now I can see there's a bunch of guidelines that I had for my overall work. If I turn off medium, if I turn off the light, the beyond, the hatch, then it's what I'm left with. Now, the only one that really concerned me was this right here, which it is just a little extra piece of line work that just somehow got stayed there. So that I could either use overkill to get rid of some of these overlapping lines. I'm just going to take these ones and just delete them. So while I have everything else hidden, or light bulb turned off for everything else, I'm just going to take these little guys and delete them. And then bring my drawing back. Hatches and all. And then my last, or one of my last steps, I keep saying my last step, but it's never the last, would be to hatch it. Before I do that, I'm actually going to take what I have currently and copy it into this CAD exercise to help me make my building section. So I'm going to take this, highlight really the whole thing, I guess, Control C to copy it, go into my AutoCAD exercise, Control V to paste it, and I can just put it kind of anywhere. So I did redo or just copy this elevation outline, and I'm just going to paste it over here for now. There's a lot of detail in this wall section that we don't need for our building section. So things like our drainage mat stuff, our French drain. All of this is just a little bit too much detail going on. But size-wise, it's everything that we do need. These hat elevations, like, or these, uh, the line, the line weight, or the line scale. I can't think of words. A little bit much right now for our batt insulation, but that's okay because we're just going to delete it anyway. I'm even going to take these, delete them out, get rid of some of the details in the frame, not all of them, because we definitely can use some of them. So what we want for our overall end result, if I look up here, is we're just kind of having where those boxes are, but we're not putting too much in there. We still have our baseboard, we still have our window frame. So just kind of, it's the same thing, but just with some of the details toned down quite a bit. Which, how did I lose it? There it is. Because for an overall building section, we're not going to be able to fit at the scale we want all of this stuff. Why does that not go down there? Weird. But hey, now it does. Okay. More details here, which I can just use the delete key to get rid of. And of course, too, we'll have to play around with some of the layers to help make it over here. But what I'll do to start with, and I can get rid of this vapor barrier underneath too, I can get rid of a little flashing detail, is to start, I got that little piece of text, to just highlight the whole thing, and I'm going to move it into place. I'm going to do it based off of this bottom part here, because I know where that sits related to here. And now I can get rid of this overall outline. Whoops. I want the green one. It's sitting on that one and it won't let me select it, but oh well. Get rid of kind of all of this extra stuff I had too. And again, if any of the line work that you want showing isn't showing, or it just seems like it's behind another layer, it's okay. You can just click on it, right click, draw order, bring to front. And sometimes you have to refresh with regen and it'll bring it to the front. And then I can use the extend tool to bring features over. But remember, sometimes extend just doesn't work if you're not in what they consider to be the right layer. Now, in this plan, or rather in this drawing, a lot of this work is going to be in the layer 6. We probably don't even need all of this detail for the window. I'm not going to bother erasing it though, just because kind of just laziness, if I'm honest. I actually want. Or what is this one from? Not sure. EX to extend it so I can get a lot of my line work ready to go for over here without having to do a whole lot of effort for the building section, because if I have the wall section done, I can just use so much of it for that. And some of these lines, like I said, can get deleted. They can go away just because they're going to be more detail than we need in this particular view. Take it and delete, take it and delete. And really anything that has that medium line weight would get put into the layer 6. I still would have to add in things like add in for my middle or my interior partition with the door. I still have to add in my window over here, which I could just do another mirror of. So once I figure out where the center of my building is and I put this wall through it, then I can use the mirror tool to just make a flipped copy of my window right over on this edge. A little more detail, of course, too, for the thickness of the wall over here, but I can borrow quite a lot of line work without having to do the entire wall from scratch. You could definitely, so I have had students in the past, a lot of students tend to just take this project with the approach of I'm just going to build out the building section off of the elevation view and I'm just going to put in each detail myself. That's fine. The thing I recommend though is after you do put in all of the details and all of the work for your building section is before you go to hatch it is to hide layer 6 so that way all of those details and things go away. And then while you're in the solid hatch layer, which I happen to be in right now, so I'll go into the hatch tool, which is keyboard shortcut H. I'll say I want to do a solid hatch. That way I can just fill all of this in kind of 2 clicks, rather 3, 4 clicks, 5. Oh no. Escape. And then you could bring that layer back on. Otherwise, you have to go and click inside each individual like piece. So that's why it's beneficial to turn it off, then go hatch it. Because having that hatch there before I would put all of these details in would have just been super annoying, the worst. But hatching it in while they're all still visible, so sitting here in the solid hatch, clicking that area, clicking this, then going into this one, and like this would be torture. So that's why I recommend hiding it before you go and do the solid fill. Let me just control Z. Whoops, I'm control Zing too much. And for like these floor joists, you can always use, you could use the array tool like I did for the foundation floor joists. You could even draw guidelines out from where those floor joists are to find the center of these. You could just take one of them and use the copy tool and say you want to move it over 16. I just typed in 6, not 16. Let me control Z. And you could say you want to go over 16 and then 32. I should have done this off the center, but I wasn't thinking. Then 48 and so on and so on and so on. And that's how you could space them out. What I did originally for this was I just did an array. So I said I wanted to do an array of this object. And then instead of having 4 columns, 3 rows. I just said I wanted 1 row. I wanted the space between them to be 16. And then I subtracted 0.75. So that would be 15.25. And that's just to accommodate for the center. And then how many did I want column-wise? And so I don't remember exactly how many go all the way across. Pretty sure I just did it as like some stupid high number, which they're not going exactly. Or did I do that math wrong in my head? I think I did the math wrong in my head off the dome, but I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out math to you guys live, because that'll just be an embarrassing nightmare for me. And then once I had as many as I wanted to, I just exploded them so I could kind of keep them around, as keep the ones I needed to make my little 3-parter here. And that's how you can use your wall section to help you make your building section a little bit easier, because adding in like all of these details manually is just going to be a really time consuming effort. So it's a little bit easier, since you already have all of those details right in here, to just kind of use and borrow from that. Now on to hatching the wall section. So I'm just going to start from working my way from the bottom and work up. So I'll start with just the dirt all the way around the edges. And what I'll do is consistently just keep bringing up this file. Let me orbit it around. So first we're going to start with the ground, which is using the hatch called Earth with a hatch scale of 8. And this one we are going to use the solid fill layer for, just so it comes out with that lighter line weight. Otherwise it's going to come out with black lines. They will be thin, but they'll be black, and we just don't want that in our drawing. So I'm switching my layer over to the solid fill. I'll go into the hatch tool, and I'm going to find Earth. I want a scale of 8, enter, and then I'll just click in the 2 areas that I want to hatch, escape to end the command. Next up is our French drain here, and we're going to do that in gravel. So for the French drain, we're going to use the pattern called gravel with a hatch scale of 2. So I'm going to go back into the hatch tool. This time first, I'm going to switch my layer, because now from now on, why are my layer drop down not coming down? Thank you. To the pattern layer, I'll go into the hatch tool, H, enter. I'll pick the gravel with a scale of 2. Escape. Next for my drainage mat here, which I believe, I can't remember which one it is. It's called like net, I think. No. It's called Plast pattern to represent drainage mats with a hatch scale of 8 again. So back into the hatch tool or keyboard shortcut H. Let's find the pattern called Plast. Change our scale to 8. Click, click. Sometimes I was hoping it would give me the error code, but it didn't. Sometimes if CAD can't see the entire area that it's trying to hatch, it'll pretend that it's not a closed boundary. So because it couldn't see the top part of that, I was thinking maybe it wouldn't hatch it, but it worked just fine. But you may get an error code saying like that it can't find a closed boundary. Next, for our concrete footing, we'll use the pattern concrete. So cast in place concrete uses AR conc with a hatch scale of 1. Back into the hatch tool. Let's change our pattern to concrete. And our scale to be 1. Click in the areas we want to fill, escape. Then for our CMUs, we're going to be using ANSI 31. Let's just confirm that. ANSI 37. See, thank goodness I confirmed it. I think do ANSI 31 and then I rotate it, but so ANSI 37 for concrete masonry units with a hatch scale of 8. So back into the tool. Oh no, what am I thinking? That's just for straight lines. ANSI 37 with a hatch scale of 8. Didn't it say 8? I hope it did. Yes, it did. And we're just going to fill in only where these CMUs got cut, not where they are just kind of the back part. For that, we're going to use, and I don't believe it's in the instructions, but we're going to use the sand one. Back into the hatch tool. AR sand. I want to say with a hatch scale of 1. Yeah. And we'll just click in the areas we want to fill. Which, whoops. See how it accidentally filled in that part too, so I'm just going to Control Z. There we go. Sometimes Hatch does some weird things. Escape. Next up, our rigid insulation going around our foundation, which for that, I clicked on the wrong thing. For rigid insulation, we're going to use the pattern net. So this is usually where I would use this one, this diagonal lines. I often will use it and just rotate it. But the instruction says let's use net with a hatch pattern of 8. So that's what we'll do. We're going to go back into the hatch tool. We're going to switch our layer over, or our pattern rather, over to net. We're going to make it a scale of 8. Which, does it really how it looks? I guess it does. I don't like how it doesn't show any horizontal lines there, but that's what it looks like. So that's, I guess, what we're going to keep. There's also rigid insulation right up here in our header too, so we can just fill that in while we're at it. Escape. Then moving our way up, what would be our next pattern that we're going to do would be, I guess, our plywood sheathing, which uses the pattern dolomite. So plywood is represented with dolomite or dolomite, don't know how it's pronounced, scale of 1. So back into hatch, change our pattern. Scale of 1. We have this plywood here. We also have plywood here, which I just realized we actually can't do both at the same time because we need to rotate it. Let me hit escape. So I want this one to be horizontal, and then I'll hit escape to end the command. Back into hatch. I'm going to leave my pattern and scale the same, but this time give it an angle of 90 and fill in that area. And if it fills too much like it just did, You can just Control Z to try to undo it and see if you can get it to fill just the area you want it to fill. Sometimes it can just be really finicky though, and I've even had to in the past go back, draw a fresh new rectangle in an area, and then try to hatch it again just so it fills just the area you want it to fill. Don't know why it does that, it just sometimes does. Hit escape, back into the hatch tool one last time, because I've got to hatch in my plywood decking up here, and I believe I want an angle of 14. Yes, 14, because that's the angle that this is at. Oh, excuse me. Okay, how much time do I have left? Oh, good. I'm at about 1 hour 30. Next, we'll do our finished floor, which will use the pattern line and a hatch scale of 4. And also things like our, well, actually, so our baseboards and trims use a scale of 4. I believe just the finished floor uses a scale of 1. So I'll go into the hatch tool, change my pattern to be line. I'm going to leave the scale at 1 and do the finished floor, but I need to change this angle back to 0. There we go. Hit escape. Back into the hatch tool, this time with a scale of 4. Enter. Do baseboard, the outside trim, the inside trim of the window, outside, inside. Okay. And then lastly, I believe would be our gypsum wallboard is the only thing left to hatch that we haven't hatched. Unless I'm wrong, which has never happened before in my life ever. Um, so we've done batting, we've done the CMUs, we've done the cast and plates concrete. We haven't done the gypsum wallboard. It uses the pattern sand and a hatch pattern of scale of 0.25. We've done plywood, we've done the soil, we've done crushed stone, we've done illustrated, we've done finished flooring, we've done drainage match, yes. So gypsum wallboard is our last thing with 0.25. And we go back into the hatch tool. We're going to change our pattern over to sand. We're going to change our scale to 0.25. And then gypsum wallboard there. Gypsum wallboard here. Gypsum wallboard here. The reason why I had to do like this separate from this is because they're done at 2 different scales. So even though it's the same pattern, they're done at 2 different scales. Just like with our plywood, because they're at 2 different angles. If I want this to be facing this way and this to be facing this way, I have to do them as 2 different ones. All right then. Now, I'm not lying when I say the final step of this assignment would be to label in all of your little annotations, all of your leaders. And so I would use these little placeholders to kind of help you set all of those up. And what I'm going to do too is highlight both of them and use the mirror command. So again, that's keyboard shortcut MI, enter. Just draw a line across that way. So I clicked there to start it, click across to end it. And I don't want to erase my source, just so I have them pointing in different directions. Because some of our leaders we can see in the drawing are pointing upwards. Now, when organizing your leaders in your annotations, there's one very important rule and then kind of two schools of thought. So the important rule is that you can never have them overlap each other. So these arrow lines cannot overlap in a drawing, because otherwise, the minute this line overlaps this one, I don't know what's referring to what. The schools of thought then are how to kind of organize them um, when it comes to where the text goes. And so the way I have it done is all of the lines terminate in line with each other, so all of the text starts at the same place. The other thing you could do is organize it so that the end of each piece of text is aligned with each other. Either way, let's see if I can find an example kind of that, I guess. That's, yeah, that's not gonna be helpful. But if I find examples, I'll just kind of show them to you as a little thing I'll put on the side. So, sorry, now I've lost my train of thought. So I'm going to show you how like I do it where I just have them all end at the same spot. The thing you're going to want to keep in mind too is that whole paper space scenario. So remember at the very beginning I showed you here in paper space, notice that now all of our leaders and everything, or rather all of our lines and stuff are changed to match what we have in our drawing. How great and how wonderful. Our roof is here, fantastic. If you put leaders in spaces that are not part of the drawing. So for example, if I take this and I copy it over to here, because this is cut off in my drawing area, anything I write isn't actually going to show up in paper space. So when you are placing them, it's kind of just a good idea to think about how they're getting organized. So I'm just going to take this guy and copy it and start to just kind of mimic a little bit how they are in the drawing that you've been given. So sometimes too, snaps can be very helpful and they can also be the bane of our existence sometimes. So for example, right now, even though my cursor is all the way kind of towards the middle of this, because that green little box is popping up, if I click, it's going to go over there. So if you want to turn object snaps off, you can do it with F3 on your keyboard or this little button down here. Now I can click on things without it snapping directly to it. So I'm just going to place a couple of little leaders. And then what I can always do is move them after the fact. So I can move this elbow piece up or down if I want to. And I can also click on this grip here and move things over if I need to. And I'm going to turn my object snaps back on using F3 so that this way I can hover over points so that way I can get them to align with each other. So again, I'm just going to click on this little note here, hover over that point so that this way I can get everything to be nice and lined up with each other. So that way everything can be organized nice and neatly. So now I would just start to label all of my different pieces. So this technically is actually pointing to my Batt Insulation. So even though Batt Insulation is the second one on the drawing, this would technically be my Batt Insulation. Might help if I spell it right. So that's just double click on where it says note, and then you can just replace it. So 2x8 wood rafters at 16 inches on center. That says 0C. And if you hit escape too, you'll get that pop-up saying, do you want to switch changes? And you can just say yes, Sometimes too, as you type, it does these little auto helpful things, which are not helpful. So you can hit Control Z to undo their auto helpfulness. So like, for example, when I type in 5/8 of an inch, it makes it a fraction like that. I don't want it like that. So I can hit Control Z to undo what they did. Gypsum wallboard. The other thing you can do is just click off to save your text changes. Now the reason why I made just all of these copies is so that way I can have 4 different options to choose from, why I mirrored it. And so that way I can kind of copy them around as I want to. And sometimes, again, if your object snaps are bugging you, you can turn them off, and I can just kind of place, escape, turn my object snaps back on, and then I can move these around. And I could also move just like them down in general. So if I have too many kind of in one area, I can move them around. You can technically also click on that elbow part itself and you can move them so like that they're flat. And then of course, move that back over. And you'll just double click inside each one of the text boxes to change what the text says. I'm not going to spend another, we've got about 15 minutes probably of class time left that I could use. I'm not going to spend 15 minutes changing every one of these text boxes for you because hopefully you've got the gist of it, but you'll just kind of choose between these different options of ones that you can copy and paste over here. Try to make sure that you're keeping them nice and aligned with each other. Don't ever have arrows overlap. So like the minute I have this overlap, this one, I don't really necessarily know what's pointing to what. I also like to keep them with those nice straight 90 degrees elbows rather than kind of these kind of wonky-ish angled ones. I just think it looks nicer, it looks more neater, it looks more deliberate. But don't ever overlap them and keep all of your text nice and aligned with each other. Once you're all done, give yourself a big old pat on the back. Make sure you save your work too. Maybe even save it at the beginning, but now's probably a bad time to remind you to do that. And so click on Save As, or go to File Save, or click on the big red A. And I'll just put mine on my desktop. And you're going to just call it Text 1728. Your last name, all caps, your first name, lowercase, and then dash class 16. You won't lose any points if you don't name it that way, but it just really helps me when I'm grading things to have everything named that way. All right. And with that, I believe I'm done for this one. And when we come back, I'll show you how to get your big CAD project already in Paperspace and how to orient everything. So thanks for watching.